The Galactic Council Chamber, a vast hall suspended in zero gravity, was filled with the hushed voices of 100 alien species. Supreme Chancellor Threx of the Zeroth Dominion, his bioluminescent tendrils flickering nervously, stood at the center. Before him, a massive hologram displayed an incoming fleet, a fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. "Impossible," muttered Archon Vylon of the Zalari, his crystalline form shimmering under the chamber's artificial light. "The humans were defeated long ago. How have they returned with such power?" "They were a primitive race," growled War General Orkor Kral Empire, his massive, armored frame tensed. "Barely space-faring when we crushed them 2 centuries ago. This should not be." A quiet, telepathic whisper from the ethereal Urin representative echoed in their minds. "We have underestimated them." A heavy silence followed. 2 centuries ago, humanity had joined the Galactic Council as a minor species, eager to prove themselves. They had been curious, innovative, and dangerously ambitious. When the Council saw their rapid expansion, they deemed humanity a threat. Earth was stripped of its sovereignty, its colonies divided among the greater empires, and its people forced into servitude. The Council had assumed humanity would perish or be absorbed. They were wrong. Now, their fleet was here, vengeance incarnate. The arrival of the Terran Dominion. The first human warship emerged from the void, a behemoth of black metal and pulsing energy. The indomitable flagship of the Terran Dominion was unlike any vessel the Council had seen. Its jagged hull, forged from unknown alloys, radiated power. Behind it, thousands of ships followed, blotting out the stars. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Grand Admiral Elias Voss stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring at the enemy fleet forming a desperate blockade. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned with cold fury. "Incoming transmission from the Council," an officer reported. "Put it through," Voss said. A shimmering projection of Supreme Chancellor Threx appeared before him. The alien leader's tendrils twitched erratically. "Admiral Voss," Threx began, his voice carefully controlled. "There is no need for war. The Council—" "Enough," Voss interrupted. His voice was quiet but carried an undeniable weight. "We remember what you did. You destroyed our home, enslaved our people, and left us for dead. Now we return, not to negotiate, but to end you." Threx raised a trembling hand. "If vengeance is what you seek, let us find another way." Voss tilted his head slightly, then gave a humorless smile. "This is not vengeance, Chancellor." The hologram flickered as Voss issued a single command. "Fire." The fall of the Council. The sky over the Council's homeworld turned to fire. The first wave of human bombardments shattered the orbital defenses. Ancient space stations, thought to be impregnable, exploded in brilliant bursts of flame. The Council fleet moved to respond, but it was hopeless. Humanity's technology had advanced beyond comprehension. Massive energy lances carved through enemy vessels like paper. Krull warships, once the terror of the outer colonies, were torn apart in seconds. Even the mighty dreadnought Vexari, pride of the Zeroth Dominion, was reduced to molten debris by a concentrated barrage. The battle was over before it had truly begun. On the surface, chaos reigned. Cities that had stood for millennia crumbled under relentless orbital strikes. Council forces attempted to rally, but human war machines, towering mechs, relentless drones, and genetically enhanced soldiers swept through their defenses like a storm. In the Galactic Council chamber, Supreme Chancellor Threx watched in horror as explosions raged outside. The chamber doors burst open, and human soldiers marched in, their black armor gleaming under flickering lights. At their head was Grand Admiral Voss. Threx took a step forward, his tendrils drooping in despair. "Please, there must be another way." Voss met his gaze with an expression of finality. "There was 2 centuries ago. You chose extermination." Threx closed his eyes. A single shot rang out. Epilogue: the age of humanity. The Galactic Council was no more. Their great homeworld burned for days before the last embers died. The surviving species, once rulers of the stars, now bowed before the Terran Dominion. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy would never forget. The black void of space rippled as the first human warship emerged. The Indomitable, a colossal dreadnought, materialized at the edge of the Council's home system, its jagged, obsidian hull glinting in the distant starlight. Its very presence seemed to distort reality, its energy output far beyond anything the Galactic Council had ever encountered. It was a harbinger of destruction, a specter of vengeance from a species long thought broken. Then came another, and another. Within minutes, the darkness was flooded with warships, a fleet so vast it eclipsed the light from the system's twin suns. They were unlike any vessels the Council had ever known, brutal, angular, designed not with elegance but with raw, unrelenting purpose. No markings of peace or diplomacy adorned them, only the sigil of the Terran Dominion, a phoenix wreathed in fire, emblazoned on every hull. Aboard the Indomitable, Grand Admiral Elias Voss stood on the command deck, gazing at the enemy fleet assembling in a desperate blockade. The Council's forces were vast. Hundreds of warships, including the mighty dreadnoughts of the Zeroth Dominion, the swift cruisers of the Andorian Republic, and the massive Crawl battleships, bristling with weaponry. They were ready for battle, but they were not ready for what humanity had become. "Admiral," a young officer called, his voice steady but edged with anticipation. "The Council fleet is holding formation. No signs of retreat." Voss smirked. Of course they wouldn't run. The Council had ruled the galaxy unchallenged for millennia. They had crushed rebellions, annihilated civilizations, and imposed their will with an iron grip. They had never known fear. Today, that would change. "Incoming transmission from a Council flagship," the officer continued. "Supreme Chancellor Threx is requesting to speak with you." Voss let the silence hang for a moment before nodding. "Put him through." A shimmering hologram materialized before him. Supreme Chancellor Threx, the ancient leader of the Galactic Council, stood with his tendrils twitching in barely concealed anxiety. His normally luminous skin had dimmed, the stress of the moment making him appear sickly. Behind him, the other Council delegates huddled in the shadows, their expressions ranging from fear to barely contained fury. "Admiral Voss," Threx began, his voice calm but laced with tension, "this show of force is unnecessary. The Council—" "Silence," Voss said, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of suffering. "You speak of necessity, Chancellor. Was it necessary when you burned our home? When you divided our people like spoils of war?" Threx hesitated. Humanity was expanding too quickly. The Council feared us," Voss interrupted. "And so you destroyed us. Or so you thought." Threx's tendrils curled inward. "We can find another path, Admiral. There is no need for this to end in bloodshed." Voss chuckled, a cold, humorless sound. "No, Chancellor. This was decided 2 centuries ago. You gave us no mercy." He leaned forward, his piercing gaze burning into Threx's. "And we shall return the favor." The transmission cut. Voss turned to his weapons officer. "Fire at will." The first strike. The void exploded in fire. Humanity's fleet unleashed its fury in a single, devastating barrage. Lances of blue-white energy, each powerful enough to carve through a planet's crust, streaked across space. Railgun rounds, accelerated to near-light speeds, tore through enemy formations like paper. The Council fleet responded immediately. Hundreds of ships returned fire, launching plasma volleys, kinetic slugs, and missile swarms. Space became a storm of destruction. The clash of titanic forces, shattering the silence of the void. The first casualties came swiftly. A Crawl battleship, its hull reinforced with layers of energy shielding, attempted to withstand bombardment. It lasted 6 seconds before a human warship, half its size, drove a superheated spear of dark matter through its core. The mighty Crawl vessel erupted in a shockwave of molten debris. A Zalari dreadnought, renowned for its near-impenetrable armor, positioned itself as a bulwark. The Indomitable focused its primary cannon, a gravitational disruptor that bent space-time itself. With a single shot, the dreadnought crumpled in on itself, collapsing into a singularity before vanishing entirely. The Council fleet began to falter. Their tactics were sound, their technology advanced, but nothing they had prepared for could withstand the raw brutality of the Terran Dominion's weapons. Humanity had not merely rebuilt, they had evolved. The fall of the Council fleet. In the chaos, individual acts of defiance emerged. The Crawl warship Blood Oath, its hull ablaze, made a desperate charge toward the Indomitable, seeking to ram the flagship in a final act of defiance. "Target the engines," Voss ordered calmly. A precision strike disabled the ship's thrusters, leaving it adrift. Seconds later, a secondary barrage ripped through its core, and the once mighty vessel was reduced to a drifting wreck. One by one, the Council's greatest warships fell. The Vexari, a legendary vessel said to have never lost a battle, was torn apart by coordinated torpedo strikes. The Andoran flagship, a monument to technological advancement, was shattered by concentrated kinetic bombardment. The battle, which should have lasted days, was over in mere hours. The remnants of the Council fleet, realizing the hopelessness of their stand, attempted to flee, but there was no mercy to be found. Humanity's warships hunted them down with ruthless efficiency, ensuring that none escaped to warn the rest of the galaxy. By the time the last enemy vessel was destroyed, the silence of the void had returned. Only the burning wreckage of the once mighty Council armada remained. The march on the Council homeworld. With the fleet in ruins, there was nothing left to stop humanity's advance. The Council's homeworld, a jewel of civilization for millennia, now lay defenseless. Dropships descended through the stormy atmosphere, delivering mechanized legions onto the surface. Towering mechs, swarms of drones, and elite human soldiers spread through the cities, crushing the last remnants of resistance. Panic spread like wildfire. The once mighty Council species, who had ruled the stars with an iron grip, now cowered in the streets. Civilians fled in terror, as the symbols of their power were reduced to rubble. In the Galactic Council chamber, Supreme Chancellor Threx stood before the great doors as they trembled under the force of the advancing troops. Behind him, the remaining delegates murmured in despair. The doors exploded inward. Black-armored soldiers poured in, their weapons glowing with lethal energy. They moved with practiced precision, their presence exuding absolute dominance. At their head was Grand Admiral Voss. Threx took a step forward, his tendrils trembling. "Please, we surrender." Voss looked at him for a long moment. Then he raised his weapon. A single shot rang out. The Galactic Council was no more. The great capital of the Galactic Council, once the heart of civilization, burned beneath a blood-red sky. Smoke choked the atmosphere, turning the towering spires of ancient wisdom into blackened husks. The streets, once filled with diplomats and scholars, now ran with the blood of the fallen. Humanity had come not to conquer, but to erase. The last remnants of the Council's armies had been crushed. The final strongholds of resistance had fallen within hours. Now, the mighty halls where the fate of the galaxy had been decided for millennia stood in silence, save for the echoes of human boots marching through the ruins. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, now littered with shattered relics and fallen banners, Grand Admiral Elias Voss stood at the center of the destruction. His black armor bore the scorch marks of battle, his steel-blue eyes cold and calculating. The war was over, but his work was not yet finished. Before him, the surviving members of the Council huddled like frightened animals. Gone were their robes of authority, their symbols of power. Now they were nothing more than prisoners of war, their great empire reduced to ashes. "Please," wheezed Archon Vylon the Zalari, his crystalline form cracked and dim. "We surrender." Voss regarded him with a slow, deliberate gaze. "Surrender?" He repeated the word as if testing its weight. "Did Earth have the luxury of surrender when you came for us?" Vylon shrank back. "We made a mistake," he said desperately. The Council is dead." Voss cut him off. He turned his gaze to the others, his voice echoing through the ruins. 2 centuries ago, you shattered humanity. You stole our home, enslaved our people, and left us to die in the dark. But we did not die. We endured. We rebuilt. And now we have returned." He stepped forward, his armor boots crunching over the remains of a shattered insignia, the symbol of the old order. "You all believed yourselves gods, ruling over the lesser races as you saw fit. You thought yourselves untouchable." He gestured to the burning world outside. And now look at you. A trembling voice rose from the crowd. If you kill us all, you will become no better than us. Voss turned his head slightly. It was Trelix, the Andoran diplomat. Once, she had been one of the few voices in the council who had spoken against humanity's destruction. Now, she knelt among the damned. A flicker of something, respect, perhaps, passed through his gaze. "We are not here for revenge," he said at last. "Revenge is personal. This is justice." With a slow motion, he raised his sidearm. The silence that followed was absolute. The age of humanity begins. The execution of the council leaders was broadcast across the known galaxy. Species that had once trembled before the might of the council now watched in stunned silence as the architects of their rule were wiped from existence. Some celebrated, having long suffered under the council's oppressive grip. Others cowered, realizing that a new power had risen, and that its vengeance was not yet complete. Across the stars, the flags of the old empires were torn down. The age of the Galactic Council had ended, and in its place, the Terran Dominion took its first steps. The aftermath. In the weeks that followed, humanity consolidated its rule. The Council's worlds were brought under the iron grip of the Dominion, their militaries dismantled, their resources claimed. The species that had once ruled were now forced into submission. Some resisted. Rebellions flared on distant colonies, defiant remnants of the old order refusing to bow. But they were crushed with ruthless efficiency. The Dominion had no patience for insurrection. For humanity, this was more than a war of conquest. It was a reckoning. On the ruins of the Council homeworld, Voss stood at the balcony of the former Chancellor's palace, watching the fire smolder. Behind him, his officers awaited his orders. "What now, Admiral?" one of them asked. Voss did not answer immediately. He looked out at the stars, at the endless frontier before them. Humanity had risen from the ashes, stronger than ever. They had claimed their place as rulers of the galaxy. But power was a burden as much as it was a prize. He turned, his voice steady. "Now we rebuild. But this time we do it on our terms." And so, the new age began. Humanity had not merely survived. They had become the masters of the stars.